At our family dinner, my dad looked across the table and asked, "Is the allowance I've been sending enough?" I froze. "What allowance?" I asked, my fork halfway to my mouth. His face drained of color. That was the moment everything began to unravel. For 4 months, I'd been skipping meals, working double shifts, and rationing instant noodles just to survive med school in Boston, while my sister posted photos from Milan in designer dresses, sipping wine on rooftops. Turns out my dad had been sending me $20 a month. I just never saw a single cent. My name is Claire. I'm 20 years old, a first-year med student, and until that dinner, I thought my family was just struggling. I had no idea the person hurting me most was the one who always said she loved me equally. My mom, living alone in Boston, was never supposed to feel like surviving a war zone. When I got accepted into med school, I thought it would be hard, but manageable. My parents had promised to cover tuition, and I assumed naively that they'd help with a bit more until I found my footing. That's what other students around me had. Some got weekly grocery deliveries from home, others had their rent paid for, even Uber credits sent from their parents just in case. I had none of that. Instead, I became an expert at stretching $20 bills. I worked 3 jobs tutoring high school students, pulling espresso shots at a campus cafe, and weekend shifts at a local bookstore. Even then, I was barely scraping by. My meals consisted of day-old bread, microwave rice, and whatever was on sale in the frozen aisle. I stopped buying coffee, avoided social outings, and canceled a dentist appointment I knew I needed because I couldn't afford it, and still, I never complained. I told myself this was how adults lived. That I was building character. That independence came with sacrifice. Every time I wanted to cry from exhaustion or scream from stress, I swallowed it down with a sip of lukewarm water and reminded myself, "You're doing this for your future." But the physical toll was real. Some mornings, I'd wake up with pounding headaches from dehydration. My hair started falling out in clumps. I couldn't focus in lectures because I was too tired, too hungry. My body was slowly breaking down, but I told myself it was temporary, just until I caught up, just until I could pick up one more shift. Meanwhile, I kept getting polite rejection messages from internships I couldn't afford to take because they were unpaid. I envied my classmates who spent weekends shadowing surgeons or networking at med conferences. I was too busy scrubbing cappuccino machines and folding bookshelves. And yet, I never once asked my dad for more money. He was busy saving lives as a cardiac surgeon back in Chicago. I rarely spoke to him directly. Mom handled the money, the updates, the everything. She'd always been the one running the house. I figured if there was anything extra, she'd offer. She never did. When I called her in early November, voice shaking, and asked if they had any extra, just $100 to help cover groceries, until payday she sighed and said, "Claire, we're already paying your tuition. Things are tight." So I hung up, sat on the floor of my apartment, and cried for the first time in months. Not because of hunger, but because I finally realized I was alone in this. While I was skipping meals to make rent, my sister Vanessa was sipping rosé on a rooftop in Milan. I didn't go looking for the comparison. Social media shoved it in my face whether I wanted it or not. Instagram was relentless. One scroll through her feed, and it felt like stepping into another universe. Velvet couches, cobblestone streets, glittering fashion shows, and designer bags in every post. She looked like a magazine spread, like a Dolce & Gabbana ad had come to life. I tried not to resent it. I told myself she was just lucky. That her life, her world, had nothing to do with mine. That it was separate. But that illusion cracked one night when I saw a photo of her at a private rooftop party overlooking the Duomo. She wore a shimmering silver dress, tagged at Dior, with a caption that read, "Mom always knows exactly what I need. Blessed, fashion student life, Milan nights." I stared at the screen so long my eyes burned. Mom? The same mom who just told me there wasn't even $100 to spare? The one who said things were tight and that I needed to learn to budget better? That single post undid me more than any empty fridge or bounced rent check ever had. Suddenly, everything started connecting in my head. The care packages Vanessa casually mentioned over our rare calls. The way she always had the newest iPhone, fresh skincare hauls, and tickets to events I only read about in Vogue. The fact that she was never working, never even considering working, and yet somehow always thriving. Vanessa wasn't just surviving in Milan. She was thriving in a way I couldn't even fathom. And none of it added up. Studying fashion abroad isn't cheap. Rent alone in that part of Italy costs more than my tuition. Add in food, materials, transportation, clothing. It would take thousands just to maintain the lifestyle she was portraying. And yet, she never seemed stressed about money. Not once. When I asked Mom how Vanessa was managing, she always brushed it off. Your sister has a different setup. Fashion requires more. More what exactly? More money? More attention? More sacrifice from the rest of us? I started remembering things from childhood, subtle. Small differences that suddenly didn't feel so small anymore. Vanessa got a car for her 17th birthday. I got a used bike. She was allowed to skip chores to focus on her art. I scrubbed the kitchen floors. Her C's were creative genius. My A's were expected. Mom used to call her our little star. I was the practical one. That's how it had always been. But I'd convinced myself it was harmless. Normal sibling stuff. Now I wasn't so sure. I couldn't prove anything. Not yet. But a new feeling had taken root in me. Colder than anger and sharper than jealousy. Suspicion. And for the first time, I wasn't willing to look away. It happened on a Friday night, right before midterms. The cafe was packed laughter, espresso steam, clinking mugs, and background jazz looping on repeat. I'd been on my feet for 7 hours, running between tables, cleaning spills, refilling syrups, wiping down counters. My back ached. My head buzzed. My stomach was hollow. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I couldn't afford to grab lunch, not with rent due next week. I told myself I'd eat after closing. That moment never came. I was balancing a tray of cappuccinos when the room began to tilt. Not spin. Tilt. Like the whole world had leaned suddenly left. My knees buckled. The tray slipped from my hands, and I reached instinctively for the counter. I didn't make it. Everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, hooked to an IV, my mouth dry and my chest aching. A nurse told me I'd collapsed from exhaustion and dehydration. My blood sugar had tanked. I was severely underweight. When the doctor came in, he asked if I'd been eating regularly. I laughed. Then I cried. They kept me for observation and fluids, then released me a few hours later with a packet on nutritional recovery and a warning. You're pushing your body too hard. This is not sustainable. Tell that to my tuition bills. Back at home, I curled into bed still wearing my coat. My phone had exploded with missed calls and texts, mostly from my manager, who'd called the ambulance when I collapsed. One message stood out. Claire, are you okay? I'm coming over. It was Ava, my closest friend in the program. She showed up 20 minutes later with 2 grocery bags in her arms. Eggs, pasta, canned beans, a loaf of sourdough, real butter. The smell made me tear up. She made spaghetti while I sat at the kitchen table, still numb. You've been scaring me, she said quietly, placing a warm bowl in front of me. You look so pale all the time. You barely sleep. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? I didn't know how to answer. I was embarrassed, angry, exhausted. So I just said, I didn't think I had a choice. As we ate, I told her everything about the 3 jobs, the skipped meals, the canceled health checkups. And when I mentioned that my parents had said they couldn't afford to help beyond tuition, her eyebrows shot up. Claire, your dad's a heart surgeon. In Chicago, you went to private school your whole life. How can they not afford to send you grocery money? I blinked. For the first time, I let the question fully land. I had always accepted Mom's word without hesitation. If she said we were tight on money, then we were tight on money. But Ava was right. Something didn't make sense. And then she asked the one question I hadn't dared to think about. Wait, how's your sister paying for Milan? That school isn't cheap. And her lifestyle? I sat in silence, spaghetti forgotten. I had no answer. Or maybe, deep down, I did, I just wasn't ready to admit it. The next morning, I called my shift manager and quit one of my jobs. My body couldn't handle another collapse, but in my mind, another kind of collapse had already begun. It wasn't just physical anymore. It was the collapse of a belief system, of trust, and I knew exactly where I needed to start digging. I'd never been close to Vanessa. Growing up, we lived under the same roof, but in two different orbits. She was all silk and sketch pads and scented candles. I was flashcards, STEM competitions, and chipped coffee mugs. Our worlds rarely collided except when Mom made them. Still, I had her number, and a question I couldn't ignore anymore. It took me 2 days to work up the courage. When I finally called, it rang twice before she picked up. "Claire?" she said, surprised. "You never call. Is everything okay?" I swallowed hard. "Just wanted to check in. How's Milan?" "Fabulous," she said with a breathy laugh. "Mom just sent me the cutest Chanel crossbody for my birthday next month. You know how she always finds the perfect things?" My stomach tightened. "That's nice. Hey, I was just wondering, how are you managing money-wise over there? Milan can't be cheap." "Oh, I don't worry about that stuff," she said breezily. "Mom wires me around. 3,000 a month. More if I need something special." "Why?" I gripped the phone tighter. 3,000? I repeated. "Every month?" "Yeah, sometimes more," she said, casually. "Like when I have networking events or need updated portfolio pieces." "Fashion's competitive, Claire. You can't show up looking like a Walmart ad." Her words were airbrushed, glossy. But all I heard was this: "Mom said there wasn't a dollar to spare for you, but I get extra whenever I want something special." My vision swam. "Claire? You still there?" Vanessa asked. Yeah, I'm here. I just have a lot on my mind. I should get back to studying." "Okay," she said. "Hey, let's talk more soon, okay?" I hung up before I said something I'd regret. That call detonated every lie I'd been fed. Mom hadn't just forgotten to send me money. She'd chosen not to. Chosen Vanessa. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she thought she was protecting me. Maybe she believed I was strong enough to figure things out. Maybe she didn't want to distract me from school, but none of it justified the deception. While I rationed groceries and collapsed from exhaustion, Vanessa was living a curated, filtered fantasy on Mom's dime. And what hurt more than the betrayal was that no one told me. Not Mom, not Vanessa, not even Dad. I stared at the ceiling that night, thinking about every time I'd tried to be understanding. Every time I told myself things were just hard for everyone, that we all had to sacrifice. But I wasn't just sacrificing, I was being sacrificed. For someone else's comfort. Someone else's dreams. The holidays were coming up. I had originally planned to stay in Boston and work straight through, but now, I booked the cheapest flight I could find to Chicago. If no one was going to tell me the truth, I was going to drag it out into the light myself. I hadn't been home in over 6 months. Chicago felt colder than I remembered, not just in weather, but in atmosphere. The house felt bigger, emptier, familiar, but not comforting. When I stepped through the front door, Dad looked up from the hallway and blinked. "Claire, you've lost weight," he said, half greeting, half concern. "Have I?" I replied, managing a tight smile. I hadn't noticed. Mom appeared a moment later, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Sweetheart," she said. "You're early." "Surprise," I said. Dinner was homemade salad, roast chicken, soup, the kind of meal I hadn't had in months, the kind of meal I used to take for granted. We sat down, the three of us, like we were a happy family. Then Dad broke the silence. "You look tired. Are you eating properly?" he asked. "Not really," I said honestly. "This is the most luxurious meal I've had in a while." "What do you usually eat?" "Instant noodles. Bread. Whatever's discounted." "What about the cafeteria?" "Too expensive." He blinked. "How much is it?" $5. A pause. Then, with quiet confusion, "Is the money I've been sending not enough?" I looked up. "What money?" "The allowance, 2,000 a month. I asked your mom to wire it to you since August." My blood went cold. "I haven't received anything." Dad turned to Mom. "Paisley, have you not been sending the money to Claire?" Mom's hand froze on her napkin. She didn't meet his eyes. "No," she said softly. "I haven't." "What?" Dad's voice rose. "Why not?" Mom took a deep breath. "There are so many expenses, Michael. We had to prioritize." "Our mortgage is paid off," he said. "We're not struggling. Where is the money?" Another silence. Then, finally, I've been sending it to Vanessa. The room dropped 10 degrees. Excuse me? Dad said. She needs it more than Claire does, Mom continued. She's in fashion. Milan is expensive. She has to network, dress the part, make connections. Claire's studying medicine, she'll be fine. I stared at her. I asked you for help, even just a little. You said there was nothing to give. You never told me you collapsed, Dad cut in. Her manager from the cafe called, said she passed out on the job. Did you even tell me that? I was scared, Mom said. Scared you'd find out I wasn't sending the money, so instead you let her starve? Dad's voice was shaking now, not with fear, with rage. It's not like that, Mom snapped. Vanessa needs support. She's delicate. She's 22, he shouted. Claire is in med school, working 3 jobs, nearly killing herself, and you're buying Chanel bags for her sister? I spoke for the first time since the bomb dropped. She told me, Mom, Vanessa, on the phone, how you send her extra whenever she wants something special. Mom went pale. You talked to her? Yes, I said coldly, and now I know the truth. The room exploded. Dad stood up, pacing, furious. How much? He demanded. Mom hesitated. 3, 0 a month. And how much extra? Sometimes another 2 or 3. For events, clothes. So 5, 0 to 6, 0 a month, he said through clenched teeth. While Claire's living on ramen, when you say it like that, that's exactly how I'll say it. He turned to me. Claire, I'm so sorry. I thought you were okay. You trusted her, I said. I did too. Dad sat back down. Slowly. Heavily. That ends now, he said. From now on, I handle all finances. I'll send you money directly. Mom gasped. You can't do that. Watch me, he replied. Vanessa needs a reality check. And so do you. We finished dinner in silence. I wasn't hungry anymore. My stomach felt like stone. Mom dabbed at her eyes, whispering about being misunderstood. Dad sat rigid, jaw clenched, eyes burning. I cleared the table in silence, retreating to my childhood room as their voices rose downstairs, then fell into angry, hushed murmurs. And I sat on my old bed, surrounded by childhood trophies and faded posters, wondering how many other things I'd mistaken for love, that were really just control in a prettier dress. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Mom moved around the kitchen like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, barely touching her coffee. Dad sat at the table, scrolling through his phone with surgical precision, as if trying to suppress the urge to speak. I watched from the hallway, invisible but listening. Finally, Dad broke the silence. Your mother and I have been talking. I walked into the kitchen slowly. About what? About changes, he said, looking directly at me. Starting now, I'll be managing the family finances. You'll get 1, 0 every month directly in your account, equal to what Vanessa's getting. No more miscommunication. Mom flinched at the word. You think I'm being harsh, Dad added, turning to her. You are, she said stiffly. You're punishing Vanessa when she's done nothing wrong. She's been benefiting from a lie, he replied. That has to end. I flew back to Boston that evening. Dad had already transferred 40 into my account, 2 months back pay and a promise for regular support going forward. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I went straight to the grocery store. Fresh bread, vegetables, real protein, fruit, olive oil, almond milk. Not one thing came from the clearance bin. That night, I made pasta from scratch. It was the first hot meal I'd cooked for myself in months. And I sat at the table and ate slowly, tasting every bite like it was an apology. The days that followed moved like falling dominoes. I cut back on my shifts, keeping only the tutoring gig I actually enjoyed. With more time and energy, my grades improved. I finally had the mental space to breathe, to study, to live. I even joined a student organization, something I never thought I'd have time for. It felt like getting my life back. Then Vanessa called. What did you say to Dad? She demanded without preamble. I told him the truth, I said calmly. That I'd been working 3 jobs and nearly passed out from hunger while you were getting thousands a month. A pause. I need that money, Claire, she snapped. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to live in Milan? Do you have any idea what it's like to collapse from exhaustion and wake up in a hospital? She didn't respond. So I added, welcome to the real world. You might need to get a job. A job? She scoffed. I'm studying fashion. I don't have time for a job. I'm studying medicine. I figured it out. And then she hung up. Weeks passed. I thought that would be the end of it. But then, something unexpected happened. Vanessa got a job part-time at a small boutique in Milan. She texted me about it, casually at first, then again, and again. Slowly, awkwardly, we began speaking more. Less performance, more honesty. It's actually kind of satisfying, she admitted one night. My boss is teaching me things about the business side of fashion, and I like earning my own money. I didn't say much, but I smiled. Maybe she wasn't as delicate as Mom made her out to be. Back in Chicago, the situation at home deteriorated. Dad discovered Mom had tried to secretly send Vanessa more money, despite everything they'd agreed on. That was the last straw. He filed for divorce. The fallout wasn't just emotional, it was legal. Financial. Mom fought hard, tried to claim half of everything, even Dad's future income. But when Dad's lawyer presented evidence how she'd diverted money, lied, concealed accounts, the judge was not sympathetic. The settlement heavily favored Dad. Everything had changed. And yet, somehow, for the first time in years, everything felt more honest. The months after the divorce were quiet, but not in the same way. Not like silence from avoidance or tension. This time, the quiet was space room to breathe, to heal, to start over. Dad moved into a small apartment not far from the hospital. The place was modest, minimalist, but warm in a way our old house never felt. We talked more. Weekly calls turned into regular visits. He flew to Boston for my midterms. He asked questions about my classes. He started remembering my professors' names. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a parent who saw me not just what I achieved, but who I was becoming. Vanessa changed too. She didn't drop out of fashion school like she threatened. In fact, she flourished. Her job at the boutique became more than a paycheck. It became a mentorship. Her boss taught her how to manage supply chains, fabric sourcing, client budgets. She started designing small capsule collections, experimenting with upcycled materials and vintage textures. She sent me photos of her first lookbook, clean, structured pieces in neutral tones. Practical, elegant, nothing like her old style. My professor said my work has matured, she told me during a call. He said constraints can be a designer's best friend. She laughed after saying it. Old me would have hated that idea. New me kind of loves it. I do too, I told her, and I meant it. Our relationship, once strained and layered with resentment, began to thaw. We started talking like equals, not rivals. No one was the golden child anymore. There was no more throne to fight over. She apologized sincerely for not seeing what I'd gone through. I guess I thought Mom just loved me more, she said, and I let myself believe that meant I deserved more. We were both trapped in the same game, I replied. We just played different roles. Mom, though, struggled the most. She moved into a smaller condo on the outskirts of town. No more housekeepers, no more luxury spas. For the first time in over 20 years, she had to work a part-time position at a local department store. She called occasionally. The conversations were polite but shallow, asking about the weather, my classes, if I needed socks. She never mentioned money. She did, however, still try to send Vanessa things. But Vanessa had changed. Thanks, Mom, but I've got it covered, she texted one day, when Mom offered to send her new boots. I'm good with what I have. That might have hurt Mom more than anything. One night, months later, Vanessa and I were on a video call. She held up a blazer she had designed, structured shoulders, clean lines, buttons she had sourced herself from a vintage market. It looks expensive, I said. That's the point. She smiled. It's not. She hesitated. Claire, I'm sorry. For all of it. It wasn't your fault, I said. We were both just trying to survive the same mother. She nodded, quietly. Are you going home for Christmas? To Dad's? You? Yeah. I was thinking maybe we could visit Mom together, just for a bit. I didn't answer right away. Mom had done a lot of damage, but she was still our mother, Still part of the story. Okay, I said. We'll go together. A year after that explosive dinner, our family looked nothing like it did before. But in a strange way, it finally made sense. Dad was happier, healthier, present. Vanessa was thriving on her own terms. I was near the top of my class, finally living like a human being instead of a machine. And Mom, she was learning. Maybe slowly, maybe painfully, but learning all the same. For so long, I thought fairness meant being treated equally. But now I know. Fairness means being seen. Fairness means someone noticing when you're falling and reaching out before you hit the ground. 3 years ago, I collapsed on the floor of a coffee shop because I couldn't afford dinner. Today, I'm preparing for my residency interviews. My name is Claire Miller. I'm 23 years old, and I'm about to become a doctor. The journey here wasn't just about exams and late-night study sessions. It was about learning how to fight for myself when no one else would. About tearing down lies that were built like walls around me, and building something better in their place. Dad calls every Sunday now, without fail. Last month, he flew to Boston just to take me to dinner after I presented at a student medical conference. He showed up with a bouquet of sunflowers and tears in his eyes. "I always knew you'd be brilliant," he said, raising his glass. "But I didn't expect to be so proud of the person you've become." It hit me then how far we'd both come. For most of my life, he had been a shadow-loving but distant, present but disengaged. Now, he was making up for lost time with intention, with presence, with effort. Vanessa surprised everyone last spring by launching her first independent fashion line. She called it Second Skin. It focused on sustainable, minimalist fashion, elevated pieces made from reclaimed fabrics and ethical sourcing. It was sleek, smart, nothing like the flashy brand-chasing designs she once obsessed over. The boutique she worked at eventually offered her a business partnership. She said no. "I want to do it on my own," she told me. "It matters more that way." She lives modestly now. Still in Milan, still stylish but without the credit card gloss. She's earned her place, stitch by stitch, and more importantly, she's earned my respect. As for Mom, it's been harder. She still works part-time at the department store, now as an assistant manager. Sometimes she calls, sometimes she doesn't. When she does, the conversations are stilted, cautious, like she's still not sure how to speak to me without the script she used for so many years. But there are cracks in the mask. Last year, she called me out of the blue. "Claire," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you." It was the first time she'd ever said it. Then she cried. And for once, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel small. I just felt sad. For her. For how long it took. Turns out, Mom had started therapy after the divorce. Apparently, she'd been the forgotten child in her own family, always trying to prove she could love someone better than she had been loved. She picked Vanessa to win with, and forgot I was never competing. She's trying now. Trying to see both her daughters clearly. Trying to be part of our lives in a quieter, more respectful way. It's not perfect. It probably never will be. But it's real. And that matters more than perfection ever could. This year, we're doing Christmas differently. Dad's hosting it in his new place with his fiancée Catherine, a pediatric nurse he met at the hospital. She's kind, grounded, warm in a way that doesn't feel performative. Vanessa's flying in from Milan, and Mom, we invited her. Not because everything's fixed, but because we're trying to start again. This time, without secrets, without scales tipping behind closed doors. Sometimes, I still think about that night in the cafe, how one moment of collapse became the beginning of everything falling apart. And somehow everything finally falling into place. I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, but I don't regret it either. Because it taught me that sometimes, families don't fall apart to break, they fall apart to rebuild.